So Thich Nhat Hanh says, in Buddhism, we learn that understanding is the very foundation of love. If understanding is not there, no matter how hard you try, you cannot love. If you say, quote, I have to try to love that person, this is nonsense. You have to understand them, and by doing so, you will love them. And that's been my experience, is that the more I understand someone's story, that love automatically just arises in me when I hear someone's story. And so this whole webinar series that we've been working, Adriana and I have been working so hard on, is all about understanding and allowing love to arise from that understanding. So this is the third on our series of anti-Black racism. So we've been doing different series of topics. Some of you may have been on the other calls of this series, some of you may not, and you don't have to have been at all. But that's the understanding that we're working on in this series, is really understanding what it's like to live in a Black body in this environment that we're in, and how that affects people, and how we can understand that and thereby increase our ability to act in ways that are healing instead of acting out of our biases. So with that, we're going to have a bell. So one of the things we often do in this tradition is we invite the bell, and we use this bell as a sort of reminder to come home to our body, to come home to the present moment. And then we can concentrate our energy and really be able to hear what's being said and really develop a kind of deep listening. So even listening beyond the words that we're going to hear. So it's a really simple practice. So if you're not a mindfulness person, don't worry about it. But you can just listen to the sound of the bell and just come back to your breath, breathing in and breathing out. And now I'd like to introduce my good friend, Katie Loncke. Sorry, my dogs. Like, there's a lot of rabbits around these days, so they go crazy. My good friend, Katie Loncke. So I met Katie when they were at the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, where they're still one of the directors, or the director maybe now. And Katie's deep practice combined with their activism work is a really unique combination, and one that I'm very drawn to in terms of getting off the cushion and practicing out in the real world. And the way they weave it together, I have found to be very transformative. And so we're so excited that Katie has come to offer their wisdom tonight. So Katie, take it away.
Thank you so much, Annie. Can I get a thumbs up or a wave of fingers if people can hear me? Great, great. Oh, so good to see your wonderful faces. Thank you for having me here. And I want to recognize that Louise Dunlap is here on the call with us. Hi, Louise. And I just want to say hello as someone who's been a huge inspiration and role model to me about combining Buddhism and social justice work. So thank you all for helping to co-create this intergenerational space for a topic that is not very easy. Honestly, I've had some body panic moments in preparing this presentation. Anti-Blackness is not exactly polite dinner table conversation. And for that reason, I'm actually very interested on the theme of listening to understand each other. I think we can't really understand other people if we don't do the work to understand ourselves. And we also have been taught this by Black ancestors and transcestors like James Baldwin, who was very clear. He said, I am not a nigger. I did not invent that word. White people did, and white people need to do the work to find out why they did, why they had the need to invent that projection and project it onto me. So the work of inner understanding, understanding ourselves, is integral in order to be able to deeply listen to anybody else's pain, right? So we're not collecting people's painful stories like a string of pearls of righteousness. This is very, very important. So I'm going to ask for a few things from y'all to be participatory in today's call. It's not just a one-way podcast. It's not going to be me just delivering things into your ears and eyes. So first of all, I want to share a technology we use at Buddhist Peace Fellowship for kind of call and response. It's a nonverbal way of showing that you hear what someone's saying on the call. So it's these emojis. And this technology was shared with us by someone named Ray Sukin-Klauber, a very genius organizer. And you can make them yourself with some paper and pens if you'd like, if you happen to have some close at hand, a pencil, a paper, anything you want. And I suggest a heart, maybe, just something simple. I often use a light bulb to say, oh yeah, that's sparking an idea in me. Oh, that really, something's turning on. And Ray often encouraged us to do either outer space or the ocean or something vast in order to hold the often heavy or painful or difficult truths that we might hear and share together. This is a really important part of not falling into spiritual bypass, which wants to keep us focused on what's pleasant in order to avoid what's difficult and painful. But we can really ground ourselves, reground ourselves in our bodies, in our breath, in nature, in some kind of, asking for a resource to be able to hold what is difficult about anti-Blackness, right? And acknowledging that we come from different lifetimes, different bodies, different social locations. And so different things will be difficult for each of us on today's call, and different things will be joyful for each of us. So if visuals are your jam, please feel welcome to make and share your emojis. I also really like to view people on gallery view at the top right-hand corner of my screen so that I can see the flashes of emojis as they arise, if that's useful for you. So thank you in advance for doing that. It helps me feel heard in the call and response type of way. The other thing I'm just going to ask folks to do real quick is to type into the chat, if it's available to you, just a sentence or even a phrase or two about what brings you here today. So we can get a little bit of a sense of, oh, like Annie said, there are so many online offerings right now. Again, anti-Blackness is not exactly light fare for conversation. So what was it that compelled you to take 90 minutes of your time today to come be with others who also care about this topic? We'll just give a couple moments for folks to share that in the chat. I'm seeing bringing together my social justice work with my meditative practice. I'm seeing I'm here because I want to see that these conversations are happening and because I trust Katie to support with them. Thank you so much, Amber. I want to speak with white people about whiteness. Hell yeah. Saving all sentient beings is so hard. True. These vows are not a game. This is a reference to Bodhisattva vows. Not everybody on this call might be Buddhist. Learning how to be an ally. I'm blushing at some of these, so I'm just going to skip the ones with my name in them. I'm seeing living in Mexico, where we don't raise how discriminatory we are, and I want to get a fuller understanding from a country where the issue is more openly addressed. Oh, God, thank you so much, Gabriela. I really appreciate that. That's so beautiful. Across false borders, we're connecting through this blessing of technology. wanting to work on my language to help others realize the impact of anti-Black racism on our entire world. Beautiful. Hi, old and new faces. I was so nervous before this, y'all. This is making me feel so much better. Thank you for sharing your motivations, for being here. It helps me feel already less alone. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm of African ancestry and European ancestry. Me too. And Buddhist. Me too. I see you. Wonderful. Thank you, y'all. I really appreciate it. Feel free to keep them coming. And I'm going to move us into a little screen share and start in on some of the content of today's talk. I'm going to share my screen. It's good and optimized. And I'm going to move us into share mode. No, not that share mode. Present mode. Here we are. All right, again, can I see wiggle of fingers or a thumbs up if you can see what's on the screen? Great, I'm seeing some thumbs up, great. Emojis also welcome. All right, we're here today with Making Visible to talk about anti-Blackness for all of the reasons that you shared and more. And I am Katie Loncke. I use they, them pronouns. And I'm a director at the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, where we combine Buddhism and social justice. Blackness, real or unreal? O Shariputra, form is no other than emptiness. Emptiness is no other than form. All things are empty. Nothing is born, nothing dies. Nothing is pure, nothing is stained. Nothing increases, and nothing decreases. From the Heart Sutra, which is a key chant and practice and text in many lineages of Buddhism. Oh, great news! Bodies and race are empty, and nothing is born, and nothing dies. So we're all good here, right? Like, let's wrap, let's go home. What are we here to talk about? This is basically the sentiment that I have heard in certain Buddhist and spiritual spaces. So, first word to the wise, beware of the bliss complacency of the we are one approach or cliche. This ultimate and relative truth that is shared through the Heart Sutra and other forms of spiritual wisdom. As Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche reminds us, ego is able to convert everything to its own use, even spirituality. So the ego may want to say or believe, I'm not a racist, I'm a good person, but I'm nice to Black people. Or, ugh, racism is awful, we gotta get rid of it. Okay, so the ego has many stories, potentially about racism. What does freedom want? Maybe freedom wants, may I and may all beings heal from racism. Racism is far more structural than personal. Transforming racism is a long, painful, and worthwhile process. I will contribute, knowing I will make mistakes, that I am no more or less worthy than anyone, and that success eludes my lifetime. Again, whoever said saving all sentient beings is hard, yeah, ending racism is also hard. So we know that spiritual bypass doesn't cut it, because for some, existence is resistance. And what I mean by spiritual bypass is, again, cloaking ourselves in the truisms that we are all connected, we are all one, there is no race but the human race. These kind of passive aggressive ways of denying people's real experiences of violence or of harm or of cruelty in these lifetimes, in these human bodies, in these racialized bodies, in our bodies that carry personal and intergenerational trauma and personal and intergenerational wisdom. So I love this artwork by Micah Bazant. We all belong here. We will defend each other. And again, this implies that in the world in which we live right now, there are things that we need to defend each other from. And Miss Major, looking regal, saying, I'm still fucking here as a Black trans elder. I shared this song in the prep materials, and I really love how this lyric speaks to the question of race as real, both real and unreal. Like form is emptiness, emptiness is form. So race is invented, it's a construct, and yet it is so impactful. It is so real in its effects on us in our lives. And so in this song, Sade sings, he didn't know what it was to be Black till they gave him his change and didn't want to touch his hand. To even the toughest among us, that would be too much. So what does it mean to be Black but not know what it is to be Black? I'm seeing some deep breathing happening with folks. That's good. Thank you. Please, like, bring the warmth and the radical side to how we're being together. Yes, I'm seeing the touching of the heart. Like, let's not forget our bodies. This stuff is heavy. I told you. So please, yeah, like, breathe with it, be with it. And we'll get a chance to be with it together in a second. And actually, let me see. Yeah, this is a good time to pause sharing. So, yes, I would love to invite, if I have a couple of brave volunteers to do a little role play. So I'd be inviting you to come off mute, and one of you would play the role of someone who is in that lane of the spiritual bypass and is like, why are you bringing up race? You're killing the mood, you're killing my vibe, you're bringing me down. Why do you have to bring this up? And the other person gets to practice role playing, hey, this is why this is important to me and why I want to talk about it. So can I have a brave volunteer to be supported in the group by playing the role of the person who wants to spiritually bypass? You can just go ahead and come off mute because I can't see everybody in one screen.
Okay. Yeah, this is Curtis bowing in. I'll certainly be glad to.
Thank you, Curtis.
You're welcome.
Oh, great. Okay, so if anyone is especially yearning to practice how to share from the heart, why this topic is important to you, especially in this moment of the COVID pandemic. You got any brave takers? Claire, thank you. Oh, I think you're still muted, Claire. Let me see if I can unmute you. No, I can't.
There we go. Except I just turned off my video. Yeah, how's that? Can you hear
Better,
me?
yes, okay. Great, we're good.
So I feel like, the bypass is kind of like detours, right? So just, I'm more familiar with those, but I'm happy to do my best here.
Thank you. Okay, Curtis, would you mind, or actually, Claire, would you mind inviting Curtis into a conversation about anti-Blackness?
Oh, sure. Hi, Curtis.
Hi, Claire.
Nice to meet you. I'm very
Thank you.
excited to be attending this webinar tonight because, you know, I feel like I'm on a journey to understand where my whiteness has brought me, and I want to keep learning as much as I can, and to be doing that with a group of people who are mindful, I think will just be super interesting and valuable.
Curtis just rang a bell in response. I love it. Silence.
So I don't really even understand what this anti-Blackness thing is about. I mean, listen, my family did not own any slaves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I tell you, you know, I have friends that are Black, you know, and I don't really, I'm not racist. You know, I care about all people. I have a meditation practice, and I don't see color.
Mm-hmm.
I see spirit. Okay. So I feel, I know there's a lot of things going on, but I don't understand why there's so much anger, and it's not my fault.
Yeah, I can't speak to your experience, Curtis, but I personally have to say that in looking at it over the years, I realized I am racist. You know, I don't own slaves. As far as I know, my family didn't, but the way racism isn't just about individual beliefs, it's about the way our whole system is constructed to disadvantage certain people and advantage others. And I've been blind a lot of my life to the advantages I've inherited. It's not my fault. You know, it's not because I'm great that you know, my parents got a mortgage and had some capital, but other people have been left out of that for years, and it's my responsibility. It's not my fault personally to try to change the system. That's what I feel, though.
Yeah, look at, I'm seeing some emojis coming up for Claire. Beautiful. Let's give a round of finger applause or emojis for Curtis and Claire.
Did we do that right? Or
yes,
did we do
yes,
that?
That was amazing. That was amazing. What you said was amazing.
Okay.
Claire, what you said was great.
Curtis, that bell and your nonverbal was amazing.
Yeah,
well,
and folks, feel free to share further reflections and insights in the chat. If like, oh wow, like Curtis, when you said this, I've heard that exact same thing. Or Claire, oh, when you brought it from the personal to the systemic, that was so beautiful. Right? Like, so folks, please feel free to chime in the chat with yeah, with any feedback. It's just, I feel like, thank you so much, both of you, for being brave and doing that, because I think it's so, so important to see examples of how these kinds of conversations can go down, especially for white people and for people who, you know, even like me, I'm someone who's Black and I have a light skin privilege, and sometimes I pass for white. And that means that white people and non-Black people of color feel like they can say certain shit to me. So I have to be prepared, you know, to be able to respond with both compassion and clarity. Great, thank you. Thanks for sharing the love in the chat. Awesome. So now we're gonna get back into a little bit more of the slideshow. And by the end of the call tonight, we'll try to leave some time at the end for Q&A and everything to come back together and kind of debrief and process. But I also want to leave you with a really actionable item that you can take to impact structural anti-Blackness today. So don't miss that part. That's coming later. All right, let me try to share screen again. Okay, in the interest of time, I think I'm not gonna play this audio clip, um, but I will shout it out. So, anti-Black racism, baselessly debasing humans since the 1450s. um, some say that anti-Blackness is the fulcrum of racism, or the agent or lever of white supremacy that turns all other forms of racism. Others see anti-Blackness as a distinct and particularly virulent form of white supremacy. Please keep in mind, anti-Blackness also appears in non-white cultures, including non-white cultures that are not primarily trying to assimilate into whiteness by way of anti-Blackness. So colorism shows up in a lot of different cultures and a lot of different societies, whether that's Asian societies, indigenous societies, Latinx societies, like pretty much any society, and including within Black communities, colorism is a thing, like the hierarchy of color with proximity to lightness and versus proximity to darkness. And so in order to understand more on the background of anti-Black racism, this is not going to be the main topic of today, because I assume that if you're here, then you probably care enough to do some research and probably already have researched about the histories and origins of anti-Blackness. But I just wanted to really explicitly name that because I find that often in the United States, our conversations about Blackness end up becoming very US centric, and they ignore the Blackness that exists in the Caribbean, in Central and South America, in Africa, all across the globe. There's Blackness, and it's not just a matter of Blackness in the United States and or just Black versus white. So really wanting to make space for that in today's conversation. However, this podcast called The Invention of Race that was put out by the Center for Documentary Studies, I found to be a pretty good primer about the pathways of anti-Blackness from Europe to the United States. And the experts and historians in this podcast cite the origins of specifically the concept and construction of Blackness in the 1450s. And the main point here, which hopefully everybody is already familiar with, but again, on the question of, is Blackness real or is it unreal? It is that Blackness is what's called a social construct. So it's something that we built, an idea that we built, has no biological basis. There is more genetic diversity within so-called racial groups than there is across so-called racial groups. And yet this myth or this fiction of race has, again, very real impacts. I like to imagine this as kind of an activity just to show a little bit of the absurdity of racial categories. I imagine an alien, a friendly alien, visiting and saying, "Oh, hi, Earthling. I've heard some talk about racial groups on Earth, here on Earth. Would anybody like to come off mute and explain to this friendly alien, what are our racial groups on Earth?" Can we get a brave ambassador from planet Earth? I'll pretend to be the alien. Hello, hello, trying to make contact. This is the first extraterrestrial life form you've ever encountered, I'm guessing. Hello, I don't know about these humans. I thought that they were curious, but maybe they're incurious. And
you know, it's something we made up. Humans are so good at using their imaginations, and sometimes they use them well, and sometimes not so much. So anything we ever say to you, consider that we might be lying.
Okay, so what are the racial groups that y'all made up then?
Oh, so we started by making up 4 of them so that one of us could oppress the other 3. It was white and black and red and yellow. And because they lived in different places, We could make up that they were really different because they also had different cultures. And we thought that the white were the best because that's what the white people said.
I see. I see. So only 4 different racial groups in the entire Earth.
Well, see, then we had to modify it a bit, or maybe a lot.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like you no longer believe in this categorization. Is that true?
That's right. It still exists as something that we believe in our heads, but it's not real out there.
Cool. Okay. Thanks. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Good
I
luck.
actually can't see your face. Can you tell me your name?
I'm Bonnie.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't
thanks,
know why
Bonnie.
I'm sorry.
Appreciate it. I'm seeing some emoji love and some sign love that people are offering you. Thank you, Bonnie. Appreciate it. Thanks for trying to explain the absurdity to the alien. Okay, so here's a little bit of antidote of medicine for these absurdities and cruelties of racial categorization. Adrienne Marie Brown, an incredible visionary scholar, philosopher, organizer, activist, artist, has shared this piece through her blog. She says, "Our task, we must become scholars of belonging. Our need, separation weakens. It is the main way we are kept and keep each other in conditions of oppression. Truth, belonging doesn't begin with other people accepting us. It begins with our acceptance of ourselves, of the particular life and skin each of us was born into, and the work that that particular birth entails." Mantra, where we are born into privilege, we are charged with dismantling any myth of supremacy. Where we are born into struggle, we are charged with claiming our dignity, joy, and liberation. Possibility, from that deep place of belonging to ourselves, we can understand that we are inherently worthy of each other. Even when we make mistakes, harm each other, lose our way, we are worthy. Practice, learn to apologize. A proper apology is rooted in this worthiness. I was at my worst. Even at my worst, I am worthy, so I will grow. Just beautiful. Yes, yes, I'm seeing some hands, I'm seeing some emojis. If you would like to just take a moment in the chat to maybe just write the either task, need, truth, mantra, possibility, or practice, which one spoke to you the most in this moment? Maybe we can take a little quick poll. I'm seeing mantra. Ooh, a lot of people are with the mantra. Truth and mantra, possibility, truth, the mantra, yes. Possibility, need, truth, all, yes. Yes, I love the echo of the mantra with the Heart Sutra, that nothing is increased or decreased. Any myth of supremacy must be based in this dualism, right, of greater and lesser. And so I feel like the mantra really shares the Dharma of, how do we dismantle the myths of supremacy that have taken root in our hearts through the society that we were born into? And to me, it requires a combination of spiritual and political practice. I don't think that spiritual practice is a substitute for political education. So that's why we're here together. I'm seeing a question. Okay, I'm seeing a couple of questions. Great. From someone about from Emily, what am I supposed to be doing as a privileged white person? I think that's an excellent question. Okay, and I'm not sure if it's a response to Adrienne Reed Brown's share, but anyway, we're going to talk later about some things that we can do. So please, thank you for sharing that, and please hold on to that question. Great. Okay. Yes, and so as Claire also pointed out earlier in our role play, the personal racism and interpersonal racism exists on a continuum with structural racism, and structural racism is actually makes up the kind of the brunt and the bulk of racism and white supremacy. So this is one among many different pyramids that show different types of white supremacy, which is kind of the flip side of anti-Blackness. And you may prefer other pyramids or have seen other pyramids, but we're about to go into a few specific examples of anti-Blackness as they show up in this pandemic moment. And so just to ground us in this spectrum, so we understand that the levels of normalization that we may encounter in our everyday lives, like, oh, their indifference. Well, I'm not really political. I don't really think about race in that way. You know, politics don't affect me. I didn't own slaves, etc. And then it's kind of increases to veiled racism, discrimination, calls for violence, and mass murder. Up here we have these kind of structural elements, which are, again, the brunt and the bulk of anti-Blackness. I'm seeing questions in the chat of if folks want to get a copy of the presentation. Yeah, I'll talk with the Making Visible folks about it afterwards and see if that might be possible. It's really meant to be kind of a shared experience, but I am also someone who benefits from materials in the aftermath. So we'll talk about it. Thanks for making the request. Okay, I'm gonna ask y'all to breathe and bring back the warmth and the radicalism, and the warmth and the radicalism, and maybe even sway and like bring some kind of rhythm into your body, because we're about to get into some painful and gnarly things. Especially Black people who are on this call, please take care of yourselves. Please take care of your hearts. I see you. And white folks, thank you for being here. This stuff is difficult to face, but we're bringing warmth, open-heartedness, compassion, and clarity, truth, unapologetic action. All right. There is a whole host of ways we could talk about anti-Blackness in this COVID-19 time, but today we're going to focus on three: medical racism, housing discrimination, and mass incarceration. And that actionable opportunity that I mentioned earlier will be about mass incarceration. So I promise it's coming. Okay, medical racism. Does anybody recognize what these images might be from and can share with us either out loud or in the chat? These are images of...
They're from Tuskegee.
Yeah, thank you. The Tuskegee Experiment. These are white doctors aided by some Black people injecting into the arms of Black people and patients. So the Tuskegee Experiment on syphilis started in 1932 with 399 Black people who already had syphilis were given false treatment for this deadly disease. By 1969, so 37 years later, the CDC reaffirmed the need for this duplicitous and deadly study to continue. So the men who were already brought into the study on false pretenses were not invited to quit. And again, these men were told that they were being offered treatment for bad blood, and then they were surveilled and treated as test subjects and given something that was not actually intended to help treat or cure them of syphilis. This was after around 1947, I want to say, when penicillin became the treatment of choice for syphilis for the population at large. So the experiment didn't end until 1972, after 40 years. And the experiment included actively hindering Black subjects from receiving penicillin and treatment. So not only were people deceived into thinking they were getting treatment when they weren't, but then when treatments became widely available, for example, in the military, these test subjects were actively prevented from seeking that treatment that could have helped them. So just breathing with this, I know it's very painful and sad, and I think it's incredibly, incredibly important as just one example among, again, many, that can shed some light on why a lot of Black people have a lot of mistrust of medical institutions, right? And so just today on Instagram, I saw this really wonderful, beautiful Black musician spreading the belief that the ventilation machines in ICUs that are being used to treat COVID will kill people. So you should avoid getting a ventilator if you get coronavirus. And there was like a big controversy in the comment section about this share. And some people saying that it's, absolutely irresponsible to be spreading that type of misinformation and discouraging people from getting tested and discouraging people from getting treatment. And so again, with Ty's opening quote, if we want to love someone, we have to understand them. We need to understand the histories of medical anti-Blackness in the societies in which we live in order to understand why people would be skeptical and suspicious of hospitals and especially federally sponsored medical institutions. Okay, the next example is about housing discrimination and anti-Blackness. So these two side-by-side maps, the map on the left shows US subprime mortgages, foreclosures, and evictions as they map onto Alameda County, which is where Oakland is, which is where I live. So as we know, the US foreclosure crisis actually targeted Black homeowners for subprime mortgages and then evicted people from their homes at a higher rate. And you can see that for my county, where Oakland is, the maps look very similar. The neighborhoods that were hardest hit by the foreclosure crisis are also among the worst impacted by COVID-19. There are actually many ways in which anti-Blackness intersects with housing, and I don't have time to go into all of it today, but housing and environmental racism also go really closely hand in hand. So one example of this in Oakland is that from 2016 to 2019, fossil fuel executives lobbied Black Oakland leaders to try to overturn a coal ban in order to be able to ship more coal in and out of the port of Oakland. And they did this despite clear evidence that our asthma risks are higher already in the Bay Area, and asthma risks disproportionately impact Black communities. So often this has to do with redlining or housing discrimination that makes the only affordable neighborhoods to live in the neighborhoods that are closest to factories, Superfund sites, toxic waste disposal plants, and things of this nature. So housing and environmental racism really go hand in hand when it comes to anti-Blackness, and this is, of course, contributes to some of the comorbidities and underlying risks that increase people's risks around coronavirus. Thank you for folks in chat who are also maybe offering resources for around where you live about these issues. I'm sharing based on where I'm at, but as we know, this is a global issue, so please feel free to share your wisdom in the chat as well. Oh, you guys can see my chat screen. Okay, hold on. Oh no. Okay, hold on. Well, okay, that's all right. Okay, moving on for the sake of time. Our third topic after housing and environmental racism is about mass incarceration. My panel is at the top. I just want to make sure you guys can see okay. My panel of viewers is at the top. Is it obstructing your view of the screen?
Katie, it's slightly obstructing the title.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that this is better. You can see my whole screen. Maybe I'll do this. Okay, better? Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, we're getting close to the end, which is putting us in good time because we wanted to save about half an hour for Q&A. So now we're going to talk about anti-Blackness and mass incarceration around specifically coronavirus. So this is a graphic shared by under the Free Our Youth hashtag, where the mother of a child in a youth prison said, "If he contracts this virus, I may never see my son again. This is one of the worst things I've ever had to go through." So we know that the abolition movement to abolish the prison industrial complex, which is a very beautiful and complex movement, is experiencing both crises and opportunities in this moment around the public health liabilities that jails, prisons, and detention centers pose with this contagious virus. So our movements are needing to swiftly organize in the face of this threat, even as people are frightened, anxious, mourning, grieving their loved ones, and as people who are also inside. Another mother of a child in a youth prison says, "My child has asthma. If he dies from COVID-19 at this correctional facility, is the mayor going to give me a tweet to say he's sorry? I won't even get to say goodbye." So again, just allowing this to sink in, trying not to rush us through and intellectualize this, while also knowing that, again, this is very painful and deep and difficult to look at. And we're gonna try to stay with it and be with it so that we can be more deeply united in our collective action towards liberation, like Adriana Marie Brown was sharing with us earlier. This is an anonymous teen in a youth prison who says, "I just want to hug my mom. We've been instructed to practice social distancing, but it's impossible to stay 6 feet away from other people because of the tight quarters." Sending a lot of love and gratitude to the organizers who are creating these graphics, who are doing these interviews, to the people who are sharing their stories really briefly. Thank you. I see your emoji love. I see your call and response, because we are here. We're still here. I really, as I was feeling the weight of this, I turned to Aisha Evans in this iconic image from Baton Rouge, Louisiana in July 2016, following the police murder of Alton Sterling. And to me, this is one of my favorite images showing the power of Black resistance and love in the face of state violence. So although we are up against very powerful harm and systemic cruelty, we come with love and with our own power. Again, sort of shifting us from the difficulty of the painful moment that we're in with anti-Blackness and a lot of death. Lucille Clifton's poem came up for me. Come celebrate with me. Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. This really, for me, again, shares the Dharma of the 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. Thank you for sharing your wisdom in the chat. Again, we're moving into some of these inspiring, soothing, uplifting images of Black love, resilience, resistance that we can celebrate in the face of all of the odds. This is an image that I love from an action that we did at Buddhist Peace Fellowship in solidarity with some land defenders. It was a morning meditation that doubled as a cop watch. We were on the lookout for the police raids that the police often like to raid encampments early in the morning when everyone's asleep. So by meditating there, we were able to give the land defenders a few more precious minutes of sleep. We've got some beautiful wisdom by Audre Lorde, Black feminist poet and philosopher, and lesbian. Happy Lesbian Visibility Day recently. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Mickey Bradford, trans femme organizer, co-founder of Southern Fried Queer Pride, is shown here voguing next to the police to protest North Carolina's hateful bathroom bill. And this artwork, again by Micah Bazant, whose work we saw earlier, says Southern trans resistance is beautiful. Yes, 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 yes. All right, and here we are. So this is the action opportunity that I promised you, and it has to do with bailing out Black mamas who are in jail. And they're in jail simply because they can't afford bail. So they're not in jail because they've been convicted of anything, but because they're too poor to afford to get out of jail. So again, if anti-Blackness shows up through the vehicle of mass incarceration in this moment, we are fortunate to exist in a time and place in which people are organizing to liberate Black people from prisons, jails, and detention centers. So I'm just gonna play this video.
Each year for Mother's Day, people gather to celebrate their mamas.
But this year for Mother's Day, we're getting together to bail Black mamas out of cage.
Sorry, y'all. Everybody's on the internet these days for work, so things take a minute to load.
Bail Black mamas out of cages and get Black mamas free. Thousands of Black mothers are trapped in jails, separated from their children.
Sorry, y'all. I'm gonna try to let it load for one more second. Well, we can be flexible. How about I'm going to stop sharing
Would we like a bell?
and
It'll be ringing.
thanks.
Sorry.
I was thinking we could start. Yeah, I mean, I always welcome a bell.
Let's have a bell.
Thank you. Making space for whatever emotions, sensations, and thoughts might be coming up. We're holding a very advanced practice together of both the non-judging mind, non-judging awareness that allows everything to be just as it is, and the heart and vision that knows that we can help make things better than they are. Really calling in the wisdom and love of all of our ancestors, generations of the past, who have loved us into being, and all future generations who may benefit from our practice and our actions today. We are small little ripples and waves in a giant, vast ocean of unconditional love. And some of our waves break onto the shores of liberation movements in this lifetime. So thank you so much, everyone, for your kind attention. I really, really appreciate it. I want to also honor a couple folks who private chatted me, Black folks in this space who left early because they didn't realize that it was going to be a space that was like mostly oriented around whiteness and kind of grappling with the importance of talking about anti-Blackness in a mostly white space. And so I just really appreciate, and they were like, thank you so much for helping make this happen, da, da, da. So again, like I feel like we're at that right place where people can have conversations that are more rare and are more difficult to have. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for making this visible and making this possible. Annie and Adriana, do you wanna, is there like a typical way that you all like to harvest questions?
No, Katie, thank you everybody. It was powerful. Thank you so much, Katie. I'm still like trying to be able to talk, but what we all usually do is, if you want Annie and myself to read the questions for you, or if you want to choose a question, or if you want people raise a hand and decide how many questions do you want to take and answer. I mean, it will depend on you.
Great. So I'll try playing the video again at 5:25 or so. But if you go to, nationalbailout.org, put it in the chat. Black Mamas Bail Out. They are accepting donations to try to bail out as many Black mamas from jails as possible before Mother's Day, which is next Sunday, right? So now is a great time to support their work. We'll find out more about them in a minute. But, oh, hi, I didn't mean to share my screen. Did someone share my screen for me?
No.
No, no.
It says I'm viewing Ross Windsor's screen now.
Oh, is Ross Windsor sharing their screen? Interesting. Let me see if I can get rid of that. Okay, hold on. Shoot.
Okay. While we figure this out. Oh, thank you. Great. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so since we get to do Q&A in the way that we want, whatever way we want, I think, yeah, it is a lot to digest. So what I'm going to do is just invite, again, in the chat, if that feels more comfortable for you, or feel free to come off mute and share with the group, what's one thing that's standing out to you from all the information that we just saw, or what's a question that's coming up for you? I like to call it Q and I instead of Q&A. So questions and insights instead of questions and answers.
Am I being heard?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh.
Hi, Ross.
Because it says mute here, so I thought I've been very challenged by the technology today. I've been on Zoom, but I've never used chat before, and I started several different chats, and then I would want to stop and listen to what you were saying or look, and then I had something blocking me the whole time. Anyway, a lot's come up. I really welcome this because I've been starting my many mornings. I lie in bed and I'm listening on Audible to Native Son, which is a very difficult read or listen. And then often I have to sort of meditate after that, but not always. Anyway, one thing that's come up a number of times when you, most recently when you mentioned the ancestors, it's painful for me because I come from a family, half of my family, my father's family was based in the South and had slaves. I have a book that my great-grandfather, I think, wrote about his experience, and he was pretty unapologetic. He wrote after the Civil War. He wound up in President Cleveland's cabinet, and he was one of the first Southerners to join the, the federal government and the cabinet. And he wrote a book which I have a copy of, and I've been hesitant. I haven't wanted to read it. My nephew read it and said that it, as my nephew put it, well, he was a man of his time, and he read the whole thing. I haven't. I've started it a number of times, but it's been painful. Thank you.
Yeah. Feeling the pain of that and feeling the frustration at certain excuses, right?
Yeah. The pain of that and the pain, my ego gets involved because I don't want to have that as part of my heritage. And I sometimes am led to wonder, oh, well, is it, is it filtering down through the genes in some way, or, you know, am I, to what extent am I influenced by that line of people in my ancestry? So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Roz. That's, I think, a very relevant share. And especially for those of us who do have white ancestry or any ancestry in which we know that our people have wronged other people and oppressed other people. And again, where Adrienne Maree Brown's mantra that so many of us found powerful creates space for those places in which we are privileged or in which we come from the oppressor group, and the places in which we are in struggle and come from oppressed groups. Yeah, if I could just speak to it for a moment, you know, I also feel the desire to disavow and disown the parts of myself that I don't like, which includes the parts of my ancestry that have fucked up and have caused really bad harm. And it's partly why I'm so grateful for spiritual practice, which doesn't absolve us exactly or let us off the hook or help us bury our heads in the sand, but if, you know, approached with an eye towards truth and clarity, allows us to heal. And we can't heal unless we acknowledge the wound, right? Perhaps we could try something that I like to use called progressive stack, which is just a way of making space for folks who may be a little less quick to share their perspectives or views with the group. So in this case, I would actually say, like, to the front could be any Black folks on the call, people of color on the call, if you would like to come up to the mic and share. No pressure, but it's like an invitation, an opportunity to share what's on your heart if you'd like, and appreciating the many folks who have private chatted me on the side also throughout the call. Thank you. I see you, I'm with you. Any POC or Black folks want to talk about anti-Blackness?
I would love to talk about it. I'm Valerie Brown, and I have to apologize, deep bow to the Sangha, that I'm totally messed up on the time. So I missed what I'm sure was really powerful sharing. The Sangha has been focusing on this topic for months now, and it feels like, you know, we're nesting different speakers' views, and this is such a deep and a rich topic, and I'm just very grateful that that we're here with people who are allies and people who are seekers and people who are curious. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing a bit about the context for this call. And I know from being in mixed race and majority white Dharma spaces that it can be a very long process to even arrive at the point that we're at now, which is being able to talk explicitly about anti-Blackness and race. So thank you, Valerie, and thank you everyone for helping to do that work to create this space. It's very important. And thanks for your patience with any ways in which I may fall short and make mistakes on the road, because we all do.
This is Curtis bowing in. And yes, so speaking from right now, right here, I'm grateful to be here in the space that um, is talking about something that is so deep. It's something that has been so wounding. Um, and wounding for us all. And I do really appreciate, the courage and the willingness of white folks uh, to be on this journey of healing and to be able to have courage for all of us to look deeply at what's going on. So, we're raw, we're tender, you know, sadness and fear and anger arise. And practice is essential. And the Dharma, the Buddha, the Sangha, who seek refuge. And for me to examine, how I've inculcated these belief systems within inside myself and this internalized oppression. So, and how complex and this is. See, I've seen pictures of some of my white relatives from back in the 20s, and I wouldn't have want to met them or walked across their property. And knowing that, and also, so I could say a lot of things, but I think most of all, this healing and reconciliation that I can have this opportunity in this life to transform the suffering of my African, my European ancestors by looking, as Ty says, looking deeply at the roots of the suffering. So, I feel supported. So I thank everyone here. And as we continue on this journey to nowhere,
Thank you so much. You have such a beautiful presence. Thank you for sharing that with us. Hmm. 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 Yeah, thanks for the love that y'all are sharing.
Annie bowing in, I just want a time check for us to say it's 8:23 and we have about 5 more minutes. And there's also a question in the chat, just in case you haven't seen that. We don't have to answer it, but.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Let's see if we can get to both the question and the video if it has loaded by now. So the question from Rhonda is, as a Black person and mindfulness practitioner, how do you balance your responses to spiritual bypass and uncritical historical analysis with speaking truth in a way that is appropriate and skillful, but also forthright and forceful without coddling and automatically soothing white sensibilities? Totally. I could say a few things from my personal experience. One is that I have a deeper fear usually of hurting people of color and other Black people than I do of hurting the feelings of white people. Um, so that's just real for me. This is also the product of many causes and conditions, including my own class privilege and the ways that I was raised to be able to challenge authority, to challenge my teachers. I was raised with a sense of cultural pride and knowledge of who I am. And so I've given feedback to professors at a master's level that they need to not only to share more than white and usually white male perspectives from the canon. Like I'm that person who will just be like, you can't reinforce the misperception that the only theorists are white people in the world. It's very harmful. So that is actually pretty easy for me. I would say that sometimes, however, I am physically overwhelmed by pain that I can sense is not just mine personally. It's intergenerational. It's coming from elsewhere outside of this body mind experience. And in those moments, I just, continue to do my best, but I have felt overwhelmed by a sense of being triggered. And again, I can try to ask forgiveness and make repair for any harms I might have caused, but usually I think what's happening is that pain inside of me is responding to the structural feeling of helplessness and fear around whiteness rather than the individual that's in front of me. And so the more that I can recognize that, then the more I can forgive both myself and whatever the person is who happened to be in front of me in that moment. We're vehicles of our karma. And for me, again, like acknowledging able-bodied privilege, temporarily able privilege, I'm light-skinned, I'm someone who's considered to be like a safe Black person to a lot of white people and other people of color. And so that informs the way that I respond to the anti-Black racism that comes up around me. And as Roz and Curtis were both sharing about, I might want to be perfect and pure and free from the stains of racist ancestors or racist tendencies in myself. But the more I practice, the more I know that the healing that can happen, the racial healing that's available, is not about disavowing our wounds. It's about looking at them and healing them. So, okay, with 2 minutes left, let's try to activate some of our energy towards metta, loving kindness, and prayers and good faith, to reuniting some more Black mamas with their loved ones outside of the cages of prisons. Let's see if I can now share this. Yeah, okay. I don't know if this is gonna work. Oh, okay, here we go. All right, I think it's gonna work, people. Oh, the host has disabled attendee screen sharing. So Annie, I think you'll need to re-enable it for me. Yeah, and perhaps as Mother's Day approaches, if you all feel called, you could invite your sanghas, your spiritual communities, to join you in financially supporting Mama's Bailout. Be great if you feel so moved.
Thousands of Black mothers are trapped in jails, separated from their children, their families, and their communities because they cannot afford to pay bail.
These people have not been convicted of a crime. These are just people that are languishing just because someone said that they may have done something. Bail has been a true driver and determinant of folks' freedom versus their detainment. In the past 2 years, we bailed out over 300 community members. We've been able to support a good majority of those folks, and we've been able to really be in community and fellowship. This May will be our 3rd year that we will be bailing out Black mamas and caregivers from your local jails and immigrant detention centers. Mamas and caregivers should not be held in cages.
This year, make your gift count. Bring a mama home for Mother's Day.
All right, this year, make it count, bring a mama home for Mother's Day. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing time and space today. This is the link that you can go to if you'd like to donate to the Black Mamas Bailout, nationalbailout.org/Black Mamas Bailout. And again, my name is Katie Loncke. I'm at Katie Loncke on Instagram. I use they, them pronouns. I'm director of Buddhist Peace Fellowship. And I send you all of the love and prayers for your protection, peace, and liberation. Thank you so much for spending time together. Oh, sorry. The bell's happening and I'm dancing and clapping.
Final bell, and then I think Adriana.
Very appropriate.
We have already dancers, that's good. So from this beautiful time together and our incredible guide and all this learning and feeling, may all of us here on this call move from this call with clarity and wisdom, and may all beings everywhere be free from suffering and the root causes of suffering.